Hola. Hola.
Hello. No. Good morning. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hola. Hola.
Sí, A cámara está llegando.
Hola. Ahora, perfecto. Fenomenal. Genial. Gracias.
Now it's working. Good morning to everyone. First, I'd like to thank CyberCamp 2017 this year here in Santander, and I'd like to thank We have four main devices: information, people, computers, and devices. Everything was very controlled. In the 80s, we have the coming of technologies and services. Email, for example. All of a sudden, in the 90s, we see internet and the participation of third parties in business. From the year 2000, the social media and smartphones. All those technologies are used by cyber criminals to disseminate their crimes. From 2010, we have the cloud, and in 2020, it's not yet 2020, but we are now speaking about Internet of Things, or Internet of Thingy, as some may call it. At present, usability dominates against security. We see all those LED bulbs that with Wi-Fi and a mobile application, we can change the intensity of the light, but we cannot evaluate whether this is a secure feature for our office or not. If manufacturers had to implement security, including devices in the router, adding passwords and settings, then the users will not buy it. And this is the problem we are facing right now. Hackers attacks against companies. What are cyber criminals looking for? They've been doing it for many years. So motivation is the money. And I don't know, or I cannot say it in millions of dollars or euros, but it accounts to 0.08% of the world GDP. That's more than drug trafficking and human trafficking together. You can imagine then the huge amount of money involved. And it's not only the economic profit, but in order to get it, they do not have to do much. In order to produce 1 kilogram of drugs, many things have to surround the process, or to move hundreds of people from one place into another. But to commit a cyber crime, there's not much they have to do. Are there exceptions in this environment? This question comes because many companies, many SMEs or micro companies think that criminals only attack large companies. This is not true, or not always true. Large companies have more technological maturity to defend themselves from cyber crimes, but small companies do not have this level of maturity, and they are the right place, or is more advisable for them to attack than large companies. And that's the big questions. Does my company really need cybersecurity? And the answer is very simple. At present, or a few years ago, we could say that in our business processes, cybersecurity wasn't a need. We had a computer just to create and print office documents. We used the postal services, and that was the end of the story. Now, all our company's processes, whether large or small, will always require internet connection, the use of the cloud. You are very young and probably do not use business services. But do you use any services without internet for your personal or business life? You are connected to internet 24 hours a day. We're all going to connect to the net. Do we know about the risks to our company? Do you know about any risk? Information, the loss of information. Information is our main asset. If we lose our information, our business will be closed. But we have many different risks. I will explain them during my presentation. We have a virus infection, vulnerabilities, phishing, the reputational loss because we had a data leak or somebody stole our information. There are many different risks, and the fact of not knowing them is too risky. On one hand, when I speak about SMEs or micro companies, we can have hardware problems due to misuse. For example, the cleaning staff that comes to our office, they carry out their cleaning, but then they disconnected the server or any switch, so we don't have access to information, or the access to information is interrupted, and everything related to our business that goes through this device will no longer be available. I can give you an example. When I was an ICT consultant in a business in León, I am from León, by the way, a cleaning lady went into our office. It was a legal firm. She went into an office where the server and the router were located, and she switched everything off just to save from electricity. And the day after, the president asked what the hell did happen. We also have a risk, what we call insiders, or former employees or unhappy employees that want to damage our business. And we should be very aware of this fact that there are many different projects that through psychological profiling, they ask about the labor prevention. There are internet applications where you give certain answers, and your employers might have enough information about you. Through a psychological profile, we can see whether somebody has an insider profile or unhappy employee profile. So the business owners can get to know this potential behavior. Of course, problems, or the more often problems are related to vulnerability. What can we say about 2017? What was the main problem? Malware. But what happened in May, June? Can you remember? WannaCry, CryptoLogger, Eternal Blue. Those are vulnerabilities. If we make a summary of WannaCry, Microsoft released the patch in March. WannaCry exploded in May. 2 months later, how do I keep on going without updating my systems for 2 months? About Telefónica, we should be thankful the way they communicated. Companies should do it as they did. But this was useful so that entrepreneurs were more aware, or became more aware of those problems, and also so that updating policies might be designed differently. We also have a problem of phishing. We can do how this is really easy. Virus, malware, and identity replacement, and ID stealing that is so much related to phishing. We have one of the most serious that are industrial spying, where we have a company that can be our competitor. We have designed a key product in the market, and our competitors can hire due to the fact that we have tailor-made cyber crime, so that they steal our information, our patent. Those attacks are quite sophisticated. They take a few months to cyber criminals, but on many occasions they are successful. Let us see a small video with a very intense summary of what I said, but so that you can see how a cyber criminal works.
pasado?
Aún recuerdo cuando tenía que esperar a
I remember when I had to wait for my day's work so that the office was empty and I could get in and steal computer equipment, money, or company's information. Since I'm in internet for my crimes, the stealing of corporate information is very easy, so I ask for a rescue. And many companies do not even realize who I am. Would you like to know our patrons in internet? You will be surprised by all the information available and how easy it is to infect computers in those companies that are not protected. Sometimes I just need an email with a virus. Once infected, I can send Trojans, carry out financial transfers, or get information to resell it. And when we think how easy an antivirus is, I don't have to make much effort. I just have to find somebody that might link this attach, executes a crack so that the systems department, in a systems department that does not have an antivirus system. So my work is easier when there is little awareness about cybersecurity. On many occasions, they install applications at the web server and they expose them in internet without realizing the need of updating them, the need of patches, the need of the password or the directory with the settings information, with the keys for databases. Thanks to this sloppiness, I can get into their kitchen without them realizing. I like people asking me to spy on their partners' telephone lines or information. So I copy the information, I review the passwords in the caches when it'll be so easy for them just to have a code, access code. When I go there, I install a hacker Wi-Fi. I start getting information about the employees and the company, and I can capture all the information, whether personal or professional. They don't know how dangerous it is to connect to unknown Wi-Fi networks. Sometimes one day they will realize and they will no longer be able to do it. Something else is when they ask me to steal company's confidential information, to telephone an employee pretending I am an IT technician, and they give me their ID and password, and I'm in control of the equipment while they have a coffee. Don't they know that this information is personal? What about those that believe that their name and their date of birth is difficult? Some other people think that just 5 consecutive letters is a good network. They need to know that they should use passwords with symbols, numbers, capital letters, etc. Internet is a grand place for us as cyber criminals, with companies that do not care about their security, or they do not even think about applying measures. They can continue to do so. We are becoming really wealthy thanks to them.
Vale, y ahora... Vale, ¿habéis visto?
As you have seen, in a nutshell, how many things are possible for cyber criminals. How do they do it? They used to attack pillars, one devoted to people. This is the easiest. We are very vulnerable. Remember that the weakest link is between the chair and the screen, or is just in front of the screen. About people, they use social engineering techniques so that cyber criminal make us do an action and we even feel good about it, the urgency of the action, so that we as users do not have time to think. Let us think about a manager that is requesting something. How are we going to say no to a manager? Speed phishing, which is just email impersonation, so that is, but in a personalized way, so that is more convincing. And some other techniques as making us visit a website, the implementation of malicious applications, and then the area of systems or architectures, where we have information related to stolen cards, malware, vulnerabilities related to websites, errors management, ill-implemented applications. So what happens with all those problems when we speak about business services in phishing or impersonation about the website contents? I'm going to show you some examples that had a great impact and that happen every day. And now I will reproduce a phishing to capture ID information. So those will be real stories that in our National Cyber Crime Institute get every day. And this is Maria. In place is spy phishing, social engineering, and defacement. Now, Maria has an employee, Alexandra. She receives an email from Ski Monitor with a PDF file. There was a previous study of the information Alexandra probably published in Facebook that her son went on skiing lessons, and the hacker investigated on her life and sends her this file. Alexandra will open it up. The hacker will know information so that Alexandra does not have to make any action or confirm about any change in the information in the file. Then Juan from IT department says that the customers are saying that the website is changed. Maria is really concerned about this, and when she goes and accesses her website, a page with malware does not correspond to the original website. Google and the browsers show us a warning message that sometimes let us access the web or not. In this case, we could get to the website, but the cyber criminal had uploaded another application that sold falsified products from the legitimate website. This is quite serious, but there are even more. Those that we have seen since the end of last year and beginning of this year, what we call the CEO fraud or the whaling. We have the phishing that affect many people, and the whaling, that is the big wigs, people that really are the boss. Now, what they do is the same as in the previous example with Maria and Alexandra, but they can access or contact people that are decision makers, not in the middle management, but in the higher ranks. Why? They could manipulate bank accounts, they could do high amount transfers. Please send me a balance of our account, or let us do a confidential operation, and please hold the information until it's public. So they use social engineering in order to convince the users, and it's easy to get into it. Don't you think that managers are not vulnerable? There's something that was said in the video, which is to be aware of this situation. On many occasions, we don't have time to be trained, to learn about security, and when we are not aware of this problem, it will be easy for us to get into their hands. If we can define the year 2017 in cybersecurity or in cybersecurity attacks, this year we can speak about ransomware. Although last year we could also speak about SMEs ransomware. This is what has been more damaging to micro companies and SMEs. Why? Once again, malware ciphers information from your device and makes it no longer accessible. In our institute, we always recommend not to accept this bribery. Why? Because it'll be never-ending. It's a business line where cyber criminals have a niche, and if we pay from this blackmail, it will never be the end of the story. But what is better, to lose information or to pay 300 or 500 euros? What would you do in this dilemma? Just be honest. You will pay. But here, we are just feeding the problem over and over, and there are many companies that pay due to this situation. So what we have to do is to prevent or mitigate the possibilities or the likelihood to be infected by those bugs. Now, before speaking about potential measure to protect our jobs, we're going to see how cyber criminals can get email addresses in order to implement phishing and how to create a phishing system. This is something quite easy, and in fact, it generates a great deal of profit. I will do it in a very simple manner. We can use false certificates and more sophisticated means, but I'm going to use a very simple one.
No podemos reproducirlo a través de ese monitor.
Bear with us a second. We're going to try to play it on screen.
¿Cómo? Sí, lo que estuvimos la prueba.
Tienes que doblar la pantalla.
Pero antes no hizo falta.
Sí, porque lo tienes extendido.
¿Me das audio? Ahí, perfecto. ¿Vale?
Here we are. Let me try to explain to you how they extract email accounts. This is one of the more commonly used tools in order to spread malware, to do phishing and other malicious actions carried out by cyber criminals. All these applications that I'm going to use and share with you are available on the internet, freely available. They're public, and youngsters probably are very much familiar with them. Good. What I'm going to do at this point is try to compile email addresses so that I can send my phishing attacks. So I'm going to use my company. I don't want to attack or sold other companies. If you give me your authorization, I can of course try to attack yours. But I'm going to use CyberCamp, and these tools, what they use is indexed information, i.e. the information indexed by search engines, Google, Yahoo, Bing, etc. Okay, I'll increase the font for you to see. So the search engines have evolved with time, and these are tools that cyber criminals are using in order to collect information. In the past, we were talking about only public information, but now we're talking about extracting information within documents, and now they can extract or collect data from the metadata of documents. And these metadata, if we're not experts, are, let's say, difficult to erase. This information, for example, our user data, logging information, the software that we're using to edit the document that can also be exposed to vulnerabilities, etc. In this specific case, if you take a look, we have a series of email addresses, all of which are public. And if you test other domains, you'll see that it's very easy to do. It's very easy to find info on email addresses. And once I have that info, I'm going to send this phishing to my coworkers or colleagues. And I could use a social engineering tool in order to compile or collect passwords, for example, from a specific site. Here I have my personal site. It's a URL, miscocinas.es/tienda. This is a backend. And through a series of credentials, you can administer your website. So I'm going to send to an employee that is managing the back end of that information, the URL of a malicious site that I control in order to steal the credentials from that back end. That's what I'm going to try to do. So I use an application. I'm very quickly going to parameterize the application that I'm going to use. I'm going to clone the site, and this is going to be the malicious equipment that I'm going to use. In this specific case, I need to know what the IP address is. Now I'm going to introduce the URL that I'm going to clone. I clone it very quickly, as you can see, and this site is now perfectly designed to perpetrate the attack. If I send someone the URL directly in order to access the site, well, he can suspect. So what I'm going to do instead is to render my attack a bit more credible. So what I'm going to do is open a Word file, a Word document, and I'm going to select this link. I'm going to modify the hyperlink that addresses me or redirects me to the malicious server. I can save this file in a PDF format, and once I have saved it, I can send this file to this person, just as Maria that sent Alejandra, the employee, an infected file. And now we're going to send this document. And so I open the search engine, and if you take a look in this tag, we have the legitimate website, and in this other tag, we have the malicious server page. It's very hard to identify the differences. They're almost identical, and in this case, for you to see more clearly, this, as you can see, I'm accessing a virtual machine, which is the malicious server from the victim's computer. And once the system is ready, I access the document's URL. and I'm unaware of that number, and I introduce the passwords, user and password, admin, admin. I access. Something happened. This always happens. I'm sorry for this. Please bear with me a minute. I'm making a fool of myself. You're very much interested in this, right? You even moved places. $39.28. I'm going to use another one. Maybe I have the cache. I'm going to use Facebook, for example. Maybe those chaps in the back of the room are more interested in Facebook. Okay, so this is my site, by the way. You shouldn't do this with pages that aren't under your control. In this case, I access the Facebook site, and here you can see legible information, but I'm going to introduce the alleged credentials of a given user and my password. As you can see, this isn't Facebook. You need to be aware of the fact that a certificate isn't being used for communications, and when we access, as you will see, we are redirected to Facebook. In this case, as you can see here, the attack has been successful, in the sense that if the victim has clicked in order to access that site and has introduced the credentials in the server where that info is stored, in this case the malicious server, I will be able to compile that data. If this attack, let's say, is transferred to thousands of hundreds or thousands of email addresses. Let's think about potential users of Facebook. Well, in that case, we will be able to use many email accounts in a malicious manner. And as they say on TV, don't do this at home, please, and do it under your own responsibility. I'm just doing this for educational purposes. Good, let's resume the presentation at this point. Good. Companies and businesses understand that ICT services can be outsourced, and this is quite common. And nobody is surprised by the fact that companies outsource their ICT services because they don't have in-house staff to do this. And if we contact our ICT service and ask them if they're aware about the need of cybersecurity, well, of course, they'll answer yes. They need to be familiar with all the latest technologies. But when we sign an agreement with an ICT provider, we always need to have a contract and agreement that has clear terms and conditions as to everything related to ICT support that we want, and also everything pertaining to privacy agreements, how they're going to treat and process information. And this is very important. And yesterday, I visited the Chamber of Commerce, and I made a presentation very much in line with what I'm saying here today. And I was asking them about who was doing the backup copies. And they said the IT service. And I said, how often do they do the backups? And they said, well, I really don't know. That's what this gent said. And that's really a problem. Because if we are the interested party, if we are the customer, and we don't know when the backups are going to be done, well, that in itself is a problem. We need to be aware of that information. We need to be on top of it. What happens when we end, for example, a collaboration with a provider? This is what we call captive customers, because they have our data, our information. They've been managing and handling confidential information. We don't know whether they're going to try to attack us or damage us with this information. So it's very important that in our agreements with them, we have clear terms and conditions as to how they're going to save all info pertaining to our company and how they're going to erase it from their hardware once our collaboration comes to an end. Probably when you need an IT service to have different actions implemented, you will need probably remote access. And you need to automate all these processes. In the past, I automated accesses in order not to have to ask for access constantly. But you need to make sure that you disable this feature if you change provider. And now we're going to move on. And I'm going to talk to you with further detail about non-disclosure agreements so that you understand all the elements that need to be included in non-disclosure agreements and need to be duly taken on board. Since we set up our business, we've of course signed many contracts with providers and customers. Some were verbal in nature or inaccurate, and as a result, this led to loopholes. So the code of ethics is based on ethical values and corporate responsibility, and to ensure a good name in our relationship with customers and providers, we started to formalize all our agreements. For example, we signed agreements with legal consultancy and with the consultancy firm. And all these providers have access to highly sensitive information information from our business. That's why we had to sign yes or yes non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements. We also reached similar agreements with our customers, and we signed agreements for non-disclosure purposes. And of course, we need to protect information and respect non-disclosure terms. As employees, we have confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements as well with our employees. Let us give you some recommendations regarding what you need to include in non-disclosure agreements based on our own experience. The structure and contents of non-disclosure agreements may vary depending on each situation, but broadly speaking, we need to cover the following sections: place and date, the parties that take part, the reason behind this agreement, the service provided, and of course the confidentiality or non-disclosure clause or term. Then we need to describe the activities performed by each of the parties and the reason behind the agreement or contract. And we need to specify the service that will be covered by this agreement, unless we will address confidentiality or non-disclosure issues. And this agreement needs to include a description regarding what we understand by confidential information. For example, procedures, techniques, designs, blueprints, diagrams, models to which the supplier can access in order to provide his service. But this classification of information will depend on the nature of each business. It's also necessary to specify what we understand by confidentiality. For example, acceptable use of information, duration of secrecy, duty, the security measures that need to be implemented, etc. Let me go back to the previous example. In the non-disclosure agreement with our legal advisory firm, we, for example, established that information can only be used for the purposes of legal advisory and not for commercial purposes. These contract requires them to ensure the confidentiality and privacy of our information. In our company, we established that there's an obligation of secrecy and or professional secrecy to be more exact. The LOPD, the legislation enforced in Spain, specifies this need for professional secrecy. And once this collaboration comes to an end, the personal data from our business needs to be destroyed in a safe and secure manner. And of course, we need to consider issues that go beyond technical measures. The non-disclosure agreements allow us to regulate and govern service provision, improving the security of our data whenever this data is accessed by third parties. We need to regulate and govern service provision today in order to prevent future problems. Don't leave this on the wayside. Can you hear me now? Yes? As you see, it's very important to sign non-disclosure agreements. This is of utmost importance because, of course, if our information has been compromised, we would like to hold people accountable. This is like a contract. We cannot expect people to be held accountable unless there is a non-disclosure agreement. At this point, I want to talk to you about security steering plans. What is this about? Well, this is the application or implementation of a series of policies, measures, and best practices what we need to adopt in our businesses. There are many methodologies, many different standards, ISO 27000 that regulates how these data management systems need to be designed. But sometimes if our businesses are small, we don't need to apply these standards. That's why we have the security plans, which are the starting point for the management of security. in SMEs and micro companies, what are the steps that we need to take into consideration? Well, first we need to conduct a preliminary analysis in order to identify the risk level of the company. We need to know where we stand. If that's not the case, we won't be able to reach our goals in terms of security. And we need to define strategic goals, the company's strategic objectives. The strategy needs to be very much aligned with the business. To make sure that we do things well, we need to identify the departments and processes that are going to be affected by the security steering plan or master plan. And of course, we will have to disseminate best practices among employees in order to implement our plan, our master plan. How should I implement this? Well, there is no specific guideline. It can be documented with a set of recommendations. For example, in the case of passwords, make sure you modify your password every 90 days. You make sure you follow the structure. Make sure you have at least 9 characters. We can have 4 or 5 tips or recommendations based on the specific needs of the business, depending on their technology, dependence on the technological maturity of the company. And we can have an ongoing improvement cycle with the 6 phases to know what the current situation is, the organization strategy to define projects, classify and prioritize. And of course, the management needs to approve all this, because without the support of the management, this won't be able to be implemented and then executed out on the field. And this master plan needs to be realistic in order to be implemented. Sometimes we aren't realistic, we are overly ambitious, and this means that implementation is very difficult, and the monitoring and auditing of this process is very, very difficult. We don't want to crack nuts using a sledgehammer here. No. We need to have a clear plan. This is going to be very important for the organization to protect and ensure cyber security. And it's very important that this plan is reviewed and revisited in a systematic manner on a periodic basis. There needs to be an ongoing improvement plan in order to review it. Why is it necessary to review this plan? Well, because changes can occur and that can call for this review. For example, our IT consultancy service perhaps was outsourced, but then one day we decide to hire somebody to do this task in-house. So that means that the whole situation changes, and that needs to be taken on board, and we need to review our plan. At the Spanish Cybersecurity Institute, they tell us, yes, what you're saying is wonderful, it's very theoretical, but I want hands-on measures. I want to know what the security level of my company is. And as a result of this need, we've developed and designed a self-diagnosis service. And in only 5 minutes' time, you can assess the state of play of your company in terms of cybersecurity, regarding people, equipment, supports. And now I'm going to simulate this. I'm going to simulate this tool.
Yeah.
I will pretend now I am an SME with medium-low technological dependence, and the tool is just a questionnaire. And depending on the way we reply, we will get the level of risk of the organization. I'm going to use for the simulation email, website, and a server. 3 technologies that almost all SMEs use. Once we select the technologies, there will be more questions, but I'm just going to simulate I am an SME. How do you update your IT systems? What was the... We have a problem with the presentation. We'll be back once.
¿Sí, no? Vale. ¿Qué ha pasado aquí? Vale. Lo que os...
All right, as I was saying, we select the technologies, email, website, our own server, and then we reply to the questions. How do you update your IT systems? We do it ourselves, just with a friend. We outsource them, or we have an IT expert. SMEs usually outsource this service. Then, do you have any protection system in your computers? Do you use it? Usually, companies always say they have antivirus installed in all their devices. So we will respond, all equipment have an antivirus. Have you recently trained your employees in cybersecurity? The majority of SMEs, in our experience, do not provide training. But when we ask those questions, they almost always say that they've given the employees information to read. Do you have access control to your venue? No, access is free. We use cards or physical security systems. We have a guard. Usually it's just keys, and they have security systems. Do you have a system to manage the password? Usually the answer is no, but users choose a password with some given criteria. How do you get rid of the systems that you no longer use? Is usually to keep a hard copy, and the rest they just go to the bin. What do you do with your hard disk when you sell them? They don't really know. Are you present in the social media? They usually have an account, but because they don't have a community manager, they usually manage their accounts themselves. How long can your company be without an email until it becomes a problem? They all answer less than 4 hours. When you ask them about the contingency plan, then they don't really have an answer. They say, well, they might prolong this time. How often do you update your email server? Majority of companies do not know what type of email service you use. They sometimes keep their email system through IT systems who eliminate the email accounts. Usually the outsource company. How long can your company be with an interrupted website? The same as with the email, less than 4 hours. How often do you make backups of your website contents? Either never or they do not know. If you see to the right, there's a bar that while we answer the questions, we have information about the level of risk, who can access to the website content, some authorized users. How often do you update the tool that updates your website? They usually do not know it. They ask the IT systems department. When you ask them about security features, they say yes, but they're not quite sure. How often or how long can your company survive with the systems down? They say if the accident happens at 12 at night, by 5 they should be up and running. How often? They do not know whether they make remote connections to their systems, and employees can access internal applications from a remote screen. Is usually who can administer internal applications, some authorized users. Where are the servers and routers of your organization located? Usually in an office space with limited access. Do you have a contingency plan in case there is an accident so that your business can no longer be running? Backups are usually the most common system, but they know about them that they haven't checked whether they are always in place. They usually say yes to this last question. Do you have contracts with your IT suppliers? They think they do in 95% of the answers. And depending on the answers, the company's level of risk in this case is 78.4%, therefore very high. What do we do to mitigate this problem? When we see the score of this self-diagnosis, we offer basic mitigation measures so that companies can implement them in their environments. Mitigation measures related to people, processes, and technologies. Once they are aware of the level of risk, they are able to implement security measures, a security guiding plan, or any other need.
Disculpa, la opción para al ampliar la pantalla ahora no me saca la presentación.
Es que tienes que... No, perdón.
Sí.
Porque tienes que cerrarlo y darle otra vez.
El típico tópico, cosas del directo, ¿vale? Lo hemos probado antes, pero... Sí, es esa. ¿Vale? Ya sabemos...
The difficulties of broadcasting live. Well, we are back. We know how to measure the level of risk of our organization. This was the starting point. Now we're going to tackle what are the protection measures for our job. At present, when we go to a certain place and we ask, it's difficult to, it's very rare to see the post-its on the monitors, but if we open up a drawer or we move the keyboard, we see that we still use this way of protecting our password. So it's very important to start from the job station. This is the place where we carry out our activities and we should protect them. We shouldn't show our password. They shouldn't be visible or accessible. We need to use a password manager as KeePass. It's a free system that will cipher our password so nobody will be able to know them. Do not let mobile devices, whether smartphones or USBs, accessible. Many of you know about situations on how do we get information from a smartphone even though protected by a PIN code. Sensitive or confidential information should never be visible, and the dustbin should never have sensitive documents. Confidential information should be destroyed. What about password? You all know that the password should have more than 9 characters, at least the capital letters, lowercase, and numbers. But you know that the fact of having a robust password, if we are victims of a phishing, is not going to protect us. The cyber criminal will get to know the password. So what do we have to do as much as is possible? In addition to using those robust passwords, we need to use all the services that use dual authentication systems, secure applications. In our business environment, we need to use secure applications. What do I mean by this? Official applications, not using pirate applications, whether crackers or other programs that are usually negative. In many companies, IT services or your friends, not to blame anybody, they probably are willing to install a pirate office. And here we are endangering our PC. Applications have to be updated. We cannot use applications without security patches. Unofficial applications cannot be updated. That could prevent any sort of computing problem. Portable information, USBs, hard disk, and smartphones. We have all lost USBs, haven't we? What happens if the information loaded in the USB? Let us think that we work in a healthcare company with highly sensitive data, confidential information protected by the law. If we lose this data, if they are made public, and the Spanish Agency of Data Protection gets to know it, we will be sanctioned, therefore, or fined. So whenever we handle confidential information, we should do it in a coded or cipher way with using Benacrypt. There are free systems that allow us to cipher information in a simple way, guaranteeing its security. And it's rather easy. I need my customers' information to be protected. First, we have to identify information and classify it. Whether it's confidential information, it should be kept ciphered in a safety box. If it's internal information, we need to apply the appropriate measures, and if it's not confidential, then we don't have to apply anything. So first, we should classify the information. According to this classification, we will implement a certain protocol to keep it, whether through users' access, if it's IT or a physical system, limiting the access by a lock, always knowing who can access. In relation to ITs, we should implement login or register measures to see when somebody has logged in or modified or changed anything. So we provide an extra feature to this security. So from the next, with a specific date that makes the updating compulsory, and we should destroy the information accordingly if it's a hard copy with conventional systems. But if we use, physical copies, there are companies we can always destroy this information manually, but there are professional companies that destroy information. There are also tools for normal users as the van or other applications that allow to do it in the office. Personal data protection. This is something that all companies are really scared about. They don't know if they are complying or not, and the actions are quite powerful and many. If we use customers, employees, and providers' information, we have to protect it, and from March next year it will be compulsory. The Data Protection Agency would safeguard the law compliance, and if we have any doubt or we need some clarification, we just have to contact them. They usually give prompt replies to our queries. In our business, we can never, or we should never request data that are not going to be used. This is something that is subject to sanctions. And if we have a website with information, we should provide information about ARCO rights, access, rectification, cancellation, or opposition. We should apply the necessary measures. Who is the responsible of data, files, etc. We should always see the personal data protection. The fact of complying with the regulation will generate trust to our customers without an exception. An easy example is you go and access a website, and if they have a trust stamp, you can trust the page. This is not always the case. Some use the certification in a non-legitimate manner, but if you know for sure that a website is complying with the regulation, this will offer a greater level of trust. Teleworking, this is something that is more present due to work and family conciliation. We need the same measures as in our office. We need to work in a secure system with antivirus, an updated system. We should only use the device for work, and whenever possible, it should be used only for work, because technological prices allow us to have now different devices for different purposes, and we sometimes use mobile devices, a smartphone or tablets, to access to our jobs. If our company had many employees using this type of portable tools remotely, we could estimate the implementation of a mobile device management, MDM, that is quite economical. So teleworking or working from home from our personal PCs, those that we also use for leisure, the same. We need the guarantee that we're working on a safe PC. It's not enough with an antivirus. We need to use it with a limited privilege ID. Who uses your computer at home without an administration? You don't use it with the administration admin, only two. This is quite an interesting measure. If we access it with the admin and is infected, it will be the end. But if we access it with limited privilege, it will only affect part of the information, even though it might be quite a malicious virus. In some occasions, and we know that this happens in companies, we know that we have an insurance that will cover for the problems, as when we buy an automobile, we know that we have to get out of the car dealers with an insurance. But sometimes this also happens, and this is more often the case from this year onward. What do we do in those situations? What are the measures? How do we sort it out? The first, we can pray. We can pray to Saint Judas. But if we hadn't implemented any technological measures, candles may not work. My grandmother, when she lost anything, she prayed to Saint Anthony, and there was somebody that could always find what was lost. But here, if we hadn't protected our system, there's nothing we could do. So plan A failed, but if we have a plan B, that is just the handling of backup. But today is still the very simple and economical way for systems recovery is that we may not have the most advanced technology to carry out the backup, but if we have a weekly backup of the company's information, we might have only lose 1 week, and we can continue with our life. If we don't have backups, our life will be more complicated. Something that we should take into account in relation to backups is to make sure that they can be restored. There had been cases when having a problem and somebody would like to restore or do a full restoration of the backup, and files are either corrupted or not able to be opened. So we should check that our backups can be restored. Do we know what a contingency plan is? Backups can be within these plans. A contingency plan is something that will allow us to continue our business. If our office is on fire, we need to have the possibility for this information used in these premises to move it somewhere else, and even though on a provisionary manner to go on working. Otherwise, our business will be interrupted and we will no longer be able to make money. And that's a difference to have a business continuation or not. And the Windsor's fire was just a good example. Some of the companies that worked there just closed. What else should we take into account? Risk management, to identify the assets and potential threats. If we have a server in a room connected to the power, we can think that if we don't use a UPS system, if there is an electricity cut, which is not always the case, but is possible, then the server should reboot, or if in the middle of an operation of copy or accessing a transaction, the server may break and they might damage the ongoing activity. There are many different examples: floods, unauthorized entry of the office. So we should evaluate the risk in a very simple way. Is the potential impact in euros multiplied per the likelihood to happen to try to implement oxygen devices in an office to mitigate a fire is absurd. It's a very expensive system for a very low risk possibility, even though the impact might be high. And then after this evaluation, we should adopt the necessary measures to move the server. We know it's connected to the net. We connect the server to the UPS and we continue working. Something that is very much on vogue now, cyber insurance or cyber risk insurance policies. This has been the case in the United States for more than 20 years, but in Spain only for the last 2 years. If works as any other insurance, if there are things that have a very high technological cost, or we do not have the capacity or the interest, we can outsource our risk with an insurance. And there are companies that when we contract those services, they also offer additional services: OPD, adequacy, security audits, and those are added values to make our company more secure. In this case, all those measures that have been introduced in our presentation, if we offer cybersecurity, what we are really offering is trust, and trust will generate business. If we have a website that is totally secure, that manages data, personal data information appropriately, I believe the monitor will switch off in 1 minute. That's the message on the screen. Okay. So if we have a secure website, then our customers will highly value it and they will use it. How can INCIBE, our institute, help? We've been working for several years and investing efforts so that companies through our website might get all essential services to have their own system, their own security system to implement cybersecurity. This is just a summary. We have the basic information kit where we raise the cybersecurity awareness of companies with an implementation plan. On many occasions, we don't know how to implement this plan. We include the plan that is deployed in different months. Then we have a self-diagnosed tool that you've seen. Then security policies, around 19, if I remember correctly, related to passwords, to Wi-Fi access, very simple, with very specific points of reference. Then we have the MOOC for businesses, self-employees. We usually organize 3 and 4 calls every year. Interactive sectorial pathways with interactive videos devoted to the main industrial sectors, industry, offices, healthcare, where our dear characters, Miguel, the so-called Miguel and Laura, through videos and questionnaires and interactive play, they speak about security according to the different industrial sectors. Then we have a serious game that is a video game, but it teaches about cybersecurity. I don't know, I'm quite old, even I look younger, but Carmen Sandiego, does it ring a bell? Carmen Sandiego, to you? Okay, it was a game that taught geography. It was for youngsters, and it's quite similar. It tries to teach on cybersecurity. Then we have a contact point for companies where you can send your doubts or queries only related to cybersecurity. You cannot ask, how do I contact with the executor, but you can ask questions about ransomware. Those are free services because this is the Spanish Public Administration anti-ransomware service, where we can decipher almost 90% of crypto infections, and a cybersecurity catalog where we have more than 5,000 solutions and services related to cybersecurity. If any of you need to know about a company that carries out the security audits, you can access this catalog and you can choose and filter by geographical areas. You have multiple ways to get to the right company that will offer you the right service. You have information in this section, Protect Your Company, from INCIBE. And if you have any question, doubt, or query, I'll be happy to answer them now, I believe.
Espera, te van a dejar el mic, aunque bueno, en un ambiente así de íntimo, casi. Buenas.
Good morning. For an SME or a micro company with limited budget, let's imagine that they can't outsource computing security services. How safe and secure can Google or Dropbox be in order to handle documents, among them confidential documents? That's a good question. And as for the data that you can upload in order to work in a collaborative manner, our recommendation is that all those documents that are uploaded to the cloud need to be encrypted or coded if they are indeed confidential documents. If, for example, you're high schoolers, right? Yeah. Our confidential information has to do with the exams, basically. But let's imagine that you have a student with PDA, and let's imagine that you upload the student's record. All that information needs to be duly protected. So my recommendation to you is to upload coded or encrypted information. Can we do that? Can we encrypt using free software? No, you have some tools like Rojos or Veracrypt that allow you to encrypt the info before you upload it. And if you do so, you're protecting yourself from providers or suppliers. We know that 100% security doesn't exist, but basically you're shielding your information and preventing others from accessing unless they have the keywords. So Google couldn't be held accountable, right? Well, you would need to revise the Google agreements, but since this is a free service, they cannot be held accountable for the data contained in those documents. It's true that the security is transferred to the provider, but if someone does phishing and extracts the passwords, I'm afraid Google has nothing to do. Someone has stolen the passwords, and Google cannot be held accountable. Good morning. You've been talking about protection measures. You haven't mentioned one. For example, using an asymmetrical encrypted email account, can that be a good protective measure? Well, emails. Emails, when created, weren't implemented with security measures because back then it wasn't considered to be necessary. But unfortunately, the email protocol hasn't been encrypted. The protocol itself hasn't been encrypted. So what can we use so that that service, email service, is secure? Well, to use asymmetrical encryption keys in order to protect our email messages, and we can use certificates to sign our emails. Those measures have a bit of a complexity, and this is like, what should I use, WhatsApp, Telegram, or Signal? How can I make a choice? You'll probably go for the easier option. If you tell the user, I'm going to give you my public keyword because I'm going to send you my encrypted, my messages encrypted. You need to download a plugin and you need to integrate my password so that you can read the encrypted messages. And sometimes these processes are considered to be overly complex. And that's a problem. It's an obstacle to implementation. And we need to ensure easier options. But of course, security comes with complexity. And I like to tell you that we're currently developing some guidelines for the use of PGP, precisely, and we will publish these guidelines in the upcoming months. Any further questions or queries? Well, if that's not the case, I hope you have found my workshop of interest, and I'd like to thank you all for attending.
Sí.